And I'm in Washington, Missouri with artist Gary Lucy here at the Gary Lucy Gallery. And Mr. Lucy is going to give us a breakdown on marketing your art. And he has some very good ideas that will be able to help folks, artists throughout Missouri and the United States for that matter, with our YouTube viewership. So please join me as we turn to Mr. Gary Lucy. Welcome once again, Mr. Lucy, to Spotlight on the Arts.
Thank you very much. We'll see if we can throw some focus on the process of marketing art.
Sounds great. I know you've got some great concepts and ideas, so let's go ahead and run with it. Just give us a kind of a breakdown, I guess, of your basic concept of marketing art and how your feelings on it. And a little bit of background, though, I guess we should share with the folks a little bit about Gary Lucy, if you would.
Well, this is my 47th year of making a living as an artist. I went to school at Cape, Southeast Missouri State University, and the first couple of years I was there, I was going to be an accountant. I was going to get a CPA, and a guy down the hall from me said, "Let's take a drawing class." And I thought, well, fine. Do they give you credit for that? And he said, well, sure. I took the class, and I guess I did well in school, in drawing and in art and so forth. But I really developed a great deal of fondness for the process and changed my major to art. And I like the students a lot more. The accounting students, hanging around with those was kind of like watching paint dry compared to hanging out with the artists, because they had a good time all the time. But I changed my major. My mom wasn't too fond of the fact that I was not going to be an accountant anymore. I was going to be an artist, and economically she thought that wasn't the best thing in the world. I did get involved. I changed my major, and all of a sudden I did realize that how was I going to make a living as an artist, you see? And I thought, well, I could teach. I could teach. It seemed like to be the most viable effort that I could have had. And I did teach for 1 year, but I decided to try it on my own, and I quit my teaching job in '72. I did wildlife art for about 12 to 14 years, and then I changed over to historic interpretation, dealing with the inland waterways of North America and so forth. I'm now kind of, I'm trying a few different things. My last birthday I turned 70, and I decided that I'm going to try a few things. I actually went back to watercolors a little bit. It's kind of been a fun thing for me. So I come in the morning and kind of decide what I'm going to do for the day, and we go from there, you see.
Now, your artwork is nationwide, like you say, and has been endorsed by many, and we recognize it throughout publication, what have you. Known for the waterways, basically, of, especially Missouri. So can you give us a little bit of an idea how you got started in the painting of the waterways and what happened on the rivers of Missouri?
A gentleman showed up on my doorstep back in the '70s, and his name was Lyle Woodcock. And Lyle had a book with him, his collection, personal collection, and he had Remingtons, Russells, Binghams, Bentons, Bierstadts, and he said he had the originals. I said, well, yeah, do you really? And he said, oh, sure, come to my home and I'll show you my paintings. And he did. He just a marvelous collection. And Lyle helped me a great deal to understand what the real world of art was all about. And he had been a collector since, I guess, back in the 20s, I suppose. And he had a marvelous collection of art. He was personal and friends and career advisor to Thomas Hart Benton for about 44 years. And he told me a great deal about the real world of art and the buying and selling of art and that sort of thing. So I credit him with a lot of different insights. I did wildlife art for about 10 to 12 years. Wildlife, I was very interested in the environment early on and so forth, and I started working with that. When I got out of college, I was going to do these paintings of the degradation of nature and man's degradation of his environment and things like that with blood and guts and so forth. And then it didn't take me long to realize people aren't going to buy that kind of stuff. So I wanted to talk about the environment and things like that. So I said, well, let's go to the positive side being the beauty in nature and so forth, and wildlife and so on. So I got involved with that. I did a few duck stamps and so forth, got involved with that. But late in the 70s, the market began to wane. There were too many people in the market. Everybody was painting ducks and geese and things like that. I mean, how many ways can you paint a duck for, flying, setting in the water, or whatever the case? And so I went to Lyle, and I said, Lyle, I need a new direction. What do you think I should do? And so we're sitting on his back porch and having a nice glass of lemonade. And he says, Gary, you need to work with the human figure. No artist makes it to the point to where you want to be unless you work with the human figure in some capacity. And Lyle was never kind of a guy to give you an A to Z formula to anything. And so I said, well, human figure, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Nudes or something? And I thought, well, no, that won't sell. People won't hang that in their living room and so forth. And so I came home, and my studio overlooks the Missouri River. And I thought, now, I've been thinking about doing historic interpretation, basically interpreting our history. I mean, that's been around since they did cave paintings 30,000 years ago and so forth, interpreting your history. So I looked at the river. People really enjoy paintings with water. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And I thought, people. It says, I bet a lot of people went up and down that river at one time. So I went to the library and I checked out about a half a dozen books dealing with the history of the Missouri River. And within the first 30 or 40 pages, I found some marvelous stories that have never been told about the river. So I decided to start doing historic interpretation. I was really concerned that the people that bought my work as a wildlife artist would not go along with that new venue of historic interpretation. But that was wrong. They all stayed. And as a matter of fact, from a marketing standpoint, I picked up a tremendous audience of people that were interested in history, which is rather vast. And everyone's interested in history, if it's nothing more than their family history or the history of their community or whatever the case might be. So that broadened my market tremendously, getting involved with that. So I embarked on basically an adventure I entitled Inland Waterways, the Highways of Our Heritage. And in the early 80s, I set myself a goal to have a show in 2004 at the Old Courthouse Museum in downtown St. Louis to coordinate with the anniversary of Lewis and Clark and that sort of thing. So I worked basically 20 years for that show. And a lot of what marketing and becoming an artist is planning ahead and trying to focus yourself with the discipline and so forth. But I tried to do the show, the inland waterway type thing. I felt that there was a void there that had never really been filled before. And the deeper I got into it, I realized that I had lifetimes worth of work to do there. I mean, I could 2 or 3 more lifetimes worth of stories to be told. And the acceptance of the product was great, very, very, very good. For instance, Lewis and Clark. I did Lewis and Clark for 6 years, and Lewis and Clark. Well, it was a very big deal in 2003 to 2006. And on an international basis, the Lewis and Clark images, we keep up with these things through, marketing and different databases and so forth. And the Lewis and Clark images have been reproduced approximately 260 million times around the world. Just come from every direction because Lewis and Clark was a big deal in that period of time, and that's part of the marketing thing, is to get your work out in as broad a scope as possible so that it can be accepted and your name recognition can be out there.
Well, now I guess we're down to marketing. I know you have different concepts and can really advise a lot of us who have our art, and you've already made some great points. Basically, when you picked a theme and it was recognized, it started working for you. So I'll just go ahead and let us know. I know you mentioned at one time that there doesn't seem to be academically much going on in the schools, universities nationwide. Can you give us your thoughts on that?
Well, I do have a great pet peeve with academia. And I've spoken. I do have I do a series of the business of art, and I've gone to several colleges, universities, and we've had an hour and a half panel discussion, basically just like we're doing right now, on the business of art. And one of the problems I see academically is they don't get it. Academia, I ask them, for instance, do you have a class dealing with the business of art? And, they look at you like you've slapped them in the face with a wet towel, and they say no. And I said, well, how are these kids going to make a living as an artist unless you teach them? The problem of it is most of academia does not know how to make a living as an artist. That's the reason they're still teaching school. But I remember over at East Central College here in Union, Larry Pogue and Chuck Shoemaker were teaching over there, and I went over to teach with a few classes, and we went to the local bar to have a few beers afterwards. And I said, you boys, you need to develop a class called the Business of Art. Now, this was just a small college in Union. And Larry put together a program where the students would go to 8 to a dozen different locations of like advertising, art, sign painters. They would come to me, different artists that were making a living as an artist, and they would sit and talk for an hour or so with that person, their background, where their marketing program is, how do they market, what kind of product do they market, who do they market to, and that sort of thing. And it was an excellent program. So I tell academia they need to do this. I mean, like I've gone to several different universities, and we'll set up a program. I mean, the last time we put together one, I put one together down at Southeast at Cape, and I bet we had 300 or 400 people there, kids. And of course, the faculty was sitting in the front row. They wanted to know how to market their product as well. And we went through this, and I have people come to me and say that they thought that was very informative and so forth. But the main thing that, in terms of marketing your product, you have to back up. And artists are so often their very worst enemy. Artists are a bunch of dreamers, and they all want to create their own persona. They want to I want to be myself. You know, academia, I blame them. They teach, oh, you must be yourself and create and that sort of thing. Well, people that are buying art, I mean, they could care less about you. They want something that relates to them as far as that's concerned. And an artist needs to learn to discipline themselves. I know early on, whenever I was, you know, it's like right now, this is springtime, and we were talking a while ago, the flowers are blooming and, you know, that sort of thing. And it's very tempting to say, oh, I'll do that tomorrow, or I'll whatever. It's a beautiful day. I'm going to go enjoy the beautiful day, you know. But if you have a project to finish, if you have a deadline to meet, you better stay in that studio and get it done. And artists, you know, I call it the hey man school of art. It's like, hey man, you know, like, wow, I'm going to do this piece of art, you know, like, wow, I'm going to get to it, man. You know, like 2 years later, well, I'm really going to get to it, man. You know, that doesn't work in the art. If you're going to make a living at it and that sort of thing. And I tell kiddos, if you're going to make a living as an artist, now this may sound simple, but it's very, very true. You have to create art people want, because people are going to have to part with their money in order for you to pay your light bill. So therefore, they have to have a product that means something to them. In my 47 years painting professionally, I can almost count on my two hands art that's been published, not published, art that's been purchased for just art's sake, whatever. People look at something and they, if nothing else, I did a painting and it was a steamboat, name was Josephine, and the people bought it because their mother was named Josephine. Now, I mean, yeah, duh, they liked the work, and the painting actually resold and went on down the line. But people look at different things in your work, and I know academia, and I know the kids are going to say, oh, yes, but it must be me, it must be myself. I don't know. There's no doubt about that. I mean, I did wildlife, that meant something to me. The historic interpretation, I got involved with the history part of it. When I was in college, by the way, my worst grades were in history, but now I do history. But I got into the history and I got interested in it. And most historians read and interpret either in a text format or a verbal format. I read and interpret in a visual format, you see. And I really enjoy that. I enjoy the history part of it. I enjoy the research part of it. When I do the rivers, I work with the rivers. I have a houseboat that I've converted to a river studio. I'll go out and work on the river to create a piece, to study the river and things like that. I enjoy the process of creating a piece of work from scratch. You know, I know we're talking about marketing, but we get around on different subjects and so forth. Behind.
Let me ask you, Gary. Sometimes there is a falsehood. Some people believe they've got to promote themselves, but your art has to be seen. It has to be accepted. So I think it's more the foundation of definitely marketing your art. Would you agree with that?
Well, I have to, you know, you need to find, to market, you've got to create a product, and back up a little bit. You've got to create a product that means something to you. I have a piece of work that's back in the gallery from an estate for sale. We have several different pieces in the gallery that are from estates that are all belong to other people. This belongs to someone else. And this was done the piece behind us was done in 91, I believe. And when you create art as an artist, you literally create it from the ground up. There's very few products that are out there today that are created from the ground up by the human hand. Almost nothing is made by the human hand anymore. And when these paintings come back like this one, they're like your babies. You literally gave birth to them, you see. And they're like your babies, and there's a great deal of comfort in seeing them. This one behind us, when it came in, I hadn't seen it maybe in 20 years or so. And my first thought was, boy, that was a lot of work. I looked at all those figures and so forth up there.
Well, now, so at a point finally in Mr. Gary Lucy's life, your art is recognized worldwide, you could say. So I guess you could say that you started out with art itself. Now, definitely the name has given some pluses to the marketing overall picture, I guess you could say. But that comes, I would think, after time. So I think that would be just understandable in that overall view. At a point finally in Mr. Gary Lucy's life, your art is recognized worldwide, you could say. So I guess you could say that you started out with art itself. Now, definitely the name has given some pluses to the marketing overall picture, I guess you could say. But that comes, I would think, after time. So I think that would be just understandable in that overall view.
Well, in terms of marketing, I was doing a show down in Texas many years ago. I'd been working professionally for about 5 years. And I was down in Texas, and there was an artist, and he painted bluebells, I think it was. It's a Texas flower, and so forth. He was very successful at it. And I asked him, I said, well, now, what do you attribute your success to as an artist or whatever? And so he handed me his brochure, and he says, well, what do you think in here makes this work the best? And I showed him a few pieces and so forth. He says, no, and he went back to the cover, and he says, right up at the top, there's my name. That's what you're selling, is your name. Gary R. Lucy. That's what you're selling. You alluded to it a while ago, a name that is that people understand, that sort of thing. I'll give you an example. If I had a Picasso in my studio, and I said that I wanted $1,000 for that Picasso, it is a signed and validated piece of artwork. It is true. It's not a copy. It's a Picasso, $1,000. You could not get $1,000 out of your pocket fast enough to buy that painting. You don't care what it looks like. You don't care what it is of. You don't care how large it is. Whatever the case, it's a signed Picasso, $1,000. Please let me give you that money quickly. Now, why? Did you like the work? No. Did you like the size? Did you like the subject? No. Picasso. Picasso. Picasso, if you'll go and study Picasso's, don't study his work, study his marketing. Picasso was a master at marketing. I mean, he had to be a master at marketing. I mean, he did paintings with an eyeball going this way and an ear going this way and the nose up here and so forth. I mean, really? But Picasso understood the art buyer. He understood getting out with that scarf around his neck and the little beret and that sort of thing. And you have a show and you're fashionably 45 minutes late. And then you have the owner of the gallery, and it's, oh, Picasso is here. He is here to share his work with you. And then he walks in and throws his scarf over his shoulder. My friends, please let me share this work with you. I have new concepts that I wish to talk with you about the art. Well, I mean, yes. And all of these people with more money than they knew what to do with, they're sitting there, oh, yes, I must buy Picasso's work, you see. And then it's perpetuated. It goes down the line.
Well, great. We must take a break, Mr. Lucy. Sounds like Picasso had the marketing concept, and maybe we can learn a little bit from that. When we return, Mr. Gary Lucy will cover his basis and what the ins and outs of marketing, some of the tools that you might be able he may be able to share with you to market your art. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
You're really not that talented.
You're not attractive.
Too fat.
You're too short.
Too old? Why don't you just give up?
Give up.
Give up.
Just give up.
Welcome back to JCTV Spotlight on the Arts and the gallery of Mr. Gary Lucy in Washington, Missouri. And we're learning how to market your art. So, Mr. Lucy, I guess we can start. Can you give us a basic concept of what it takes to market your art in different aspects, I guess? See what you can share with us on that.
You have to create a product, and a product that people want. When I first started off, I did wildlife art, and I tried to identify my market, the individuals that were interested in the environment, in nature, and things like that, and tried to market to them. One of them, for instance, I did. A gentleman said, well, why don't you enter the federal duck stamp competition? And he explained to me what that was. It's for those, you have to go buy a duck stamp to go duck hunting and things like that. And at that time, before the government got involved, the government completely destroyed the whole project. Mm-hmm. But before the government got involved, it was a very lucrative thing to win. The duck stamp competition was. And of course I was doing wildlife and so forth. So I entered the duck stamp competition in '73 and got second place out of like 600 or 700 entries. And that gave me a name recognition and introduced me to a lot of publishers and things like that. It spread the name and so forth around at a very early age. I'm actually glad I didn't win it because I was not ready to win that competition at that early age and so forth. But it established a venue, wildlife venue, so I began to market to that venue. And we talked a little earlier about the fact that everything has a lifespan. You know, you look at marketing products, automobiles, marketing clothing, whatever. Everything has a fashion. You have to understand what the fashion is. You have to understand what the interest level is. You understand what people are interested in. And people, if you look now, I mean, there used to be wildlife art galleries all over the place. You remember? They're all gone now. And so I had to refocus, and through the guidance of my friend Lyle Woodcock, I refocused and decided to do historic interpretation. And like I was saying, you know, historic interpretation has been around for a very long time. I mean, not because of its religious significance, but the Last Supper, for instance, is historic interpretation, you see. So I got in that market, and you have to establish, you have a venue, you have a subject matter. Now, are people interested in that? If so, who are those people, and how do you find them? I speak to history groups. I speak to people that are interested in different things. I went to a symposium in Cincinnati not too long ago on the rivers. I went to several when I did Lewis and Clark. I went to several symposiums that dealt with Lewis and Clark and displayed my work there and that sort of thing. In order to market the product, you got to find out who is interested in your product, and how are you going to get your product in front of those people.
So, if I may ask, what must be in place before someone really considers marketing their art?
All the artists that I have ever known that were successful, they look at their art and they basically decide, where is my market on this? I know early on, when I first quit my teaching job, I went from one thing to another, trying to find something. But once I focused on that market and created for that market, I became more successful. I know artists that they open a gallery or whatever the case might be, and they create large pieces of artwork. I've got to, when academia, bless their heart, teaches all these kids they got to paint big and express themselves and so forth and so on. But the fact of it is, people don't really want big things for their homes, you see. Marketing-wise, as a matter of fact, when I first came out of school, I was going to be a metal sculptor. I was going to create metal pieces, direct metal type sculpture. And I got in it, and I got to looking around, and I realized that if I was going to make a living at that, I'd probably have to do commercial pieces, whatever, because people do not have room for three-dimensional artworks in their home. And so I thought, I am going to have to paint. I'm going to have to create two-dimensional work, because people have all kinds of wall space, but they generally do not have room for three-dimensional type work. It's part of the evaluating the market. Where is your market and what you're going to go for?
Well, now once you evaluated the market, I have some notes here, questions. There's different tools that are available nowadays that might have not been even 30, 40 years ago. One of them, social media. So it's like people have suggested these story cards, 5x7 story cards, your portfolio, which you have an excellent portfolio. There's TV, radio, interviews, magazine, print, newspaper, social media again, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, different websites. Even down to endorsement from an individual or agency I guess these are all factors nowadays of marketing. Would you consider these to be? And can you enlighten us on some of this actual taking the step forward into marketing?
Well, one thing that has been a fantastic help is this camera, for instance, digital type situations. Used to, when I would make my prints, we would have to do a whole edition and things like that. Now we don't have to do that. We can use the digital images and so forth and do fantastic things with them. But the internet has been a marvelous thing in terms of, I wish I'd have had that 47 years ago. I just did a series of about 4 little watercolors, and literally I put them on Facebook and sold all 4 of them, you see. That's a marvelous thing. And, you know, there's Instagram, there's all types of different things that you can put your work on. And Facebook, the last piece that I put on there, I don't know, we got lots of comments. And then they got shares, which means that all of a sudden your work now is going in front of their friends, which, you know, now instead of 1,000, now you got 10,000 people that are looking at different things. So the internet is fantastic for marketing your work, and it's free.
Well, then that brings up another question. A lot of people do work, we could call it a circuit, throughout the different states, United States, with their art. Do you have a recommendation on how many shows? Again, if you're working a marketable area, and sometimes it's better outside your living area. We have a gentleman, David Plank, in southern Missouri, down around Salem, and they do know of David, but his art speaks well with the birds of Missouri, birds of Arkansas. He sends his greetings to you if I did meet up again.
I've known David for 47 years and so forth. David does a fantastic work and so forth.
So he's found locally, he's found it's best to get on out of town and your art. So what's your ideas on marketing as far as getting out and hitting the road?
I call it kind of being on the road. I haven't been on the road now, I guess, for maybe 25 years or so. If I go out for a showing, it's a specific location, and generally it's just my work and so forth that's shown. However, back in the early 70s, I went to, Texas, Indiana, East Coast, and so forth. I had a van, and I would make the shows on the weekend. Lots of times I would paint 5 days a week in the studio and pack everything up on Friday and head to a show somewhere. Early on, whenever you're out there trying to make it, go to small sidewalk shows and so forth. Try to find shows that are judged, and get in the judged shows, because the judges make sure there's a quality type of work. If there's quality work, that draws a better crowd, people that have the money to buy the work and things like that. But I don't care where you are, what you're doing. If you're showing your work, you're marketing yourself. And your booth, now marketing-wise, you'll have a booth that you put your work in. Right in the middle, up in the top, right across there, you put your name. Now, we talked about a while ago, the thing that you are selling is not your work, it's your name. And when you set your booth up, make sure Gary R. Lucy is right up there in front of everybody.
So you've laid some tire tread on the roads in your early years, so that's good to know. It just doesn't happen. You've done your leg work. Well, how do you, I've got the questions, how do you arrive at market selling price? Is there a formula for that based on the demographic, as we learned so much about in marketing?
Well, whenever I first quit my teaching job, the very first commission I ever got was a gentleman wanted me to paint a painting of his farm. And for $75, I did a painting that was 2 feet by 4 feet, I guess, something like that. And I figured that's how much I had in it for the canvas and the paints and this and that. And I was just trying to make sure I was covering my cost. And I tried to make enough money to pay the rent and the utilities and that sort of thing. Don't get into it right off the bat and say, well, I want $10,000 for it. Well, that's not going to happen. Start off, be realistic, and don't raise your prices quickly. do a little escalation as far as that's concerned, and think about the economy. If the economy is slow, then you will have to back off and regroup and do smaller things. I remember when I first got involved with the environment, I started doing wildflower paintings. I mean, they say women buy about 90% of the art. Sure. And so I said, well, what am I interested? I was interested in the environment at that time. Well, what is beautiful? Flowers are beautiful. Well, let's learn something about the wildflowers of Missouri. So I got a book, started studying that, and in the spring I got out and started tracking wildflowers down. I took a lot of photographs, set up a lot of things, and I did some paintings, about 8 by 10, little small paintings. You can keep the price down so that they're affordable. Then I made a little separate type of entry frame. It talked about the biological name of the flower, the location of the flower, and different information. So it was a kind of a teaching experience as well as an aesthetic experience with the art and that sort of thing. And I sold them for, I don't know, $350, $400 a piece. And I could do maybe one painting a day, something like that. But I found a subject matter that I could market the subject matter, and that was interesting to me, and therefore I maintain an interest level in it. And creating artwork that you're not interested in is very, well, it's almost like pulling teeth. I mean, you got to do it. And hey, I have done things in the last 47 years that I said, what am I doing? But it paid the bills.
Yes. Now, paying the bill, people ask the question, what type of percentage would a person on a commission basis, can you give us an idea? Is there a flexible percentage rate commission-wise that you would ask for?
Well, a lot of commissions, first of all, if you work with a gallery, a lot of artists, I have a gallery. I've maintained my gallery since 1980, I guess. I opened the gallery here in town. And maintaining a gallery is a lot of work. A lot of artists say, I got to have my own gallery. I got to have this. I got to have that. But it's a great expense. You have to have people that run the gallery, maintain the gallery, and so forth. It's a difficult thing. Now, as an artist, you can go to a gallery, for instance, and they will sell your work. I mean, the first time I went to a gallery, the Art Gallery of Hog Hollow in St. Louis, June and Thelma were there, and they the very first gallery I ever went to, and they took my work and they sold it and that sort of thing. And most galleries, if they buy the work outright, like if you're going to sell the work for $100, they'll give you $50 for it. It's a 50%. Generally speaking, a gallery gets a third of what you pay for it. Now, if you're an artist and you're trying to sell your work and you go to a gallery, try to find a gallery that is in business to make money. Now, that sounds logical, but a great deal of galleries, art galleries, are run by like ladies that have an art degree in something like that. They have a master's of fine arts and art history or something like that, and they got time on their hands, and their husbands are wealthy people or whatever, and they decide, well, we'll open a gallery and so forth. Well, the gallery is a part-time, for-fun operation for a lot of them, and your chances of selling a lot of work through them are not going to be too good.
So I guess that ties into my next question. It's almost like I have in mind with the next question. When would one consider hiring maybe a marketing firm? Well, those people are in business to help you make money. So it does tie into a gallery. They're there to make money, a gallery that is making money. So that would be a good point to consider. Marketing firm, at what point would you, or have you ever used a marketing firm?
I have never used anything like that. I've looked into it, but the problem of it is that's very expensive to hire someone. You've got to pay a salary, and if you do that, all of a sudden you now have a payroll to meet. You see, and I know myself. I used to have a lot of very liberal attitudes toward things and so forth, and my mind changed a great deal when all of a sudden I had a business to run and that sort of thing, and you had to meet a payroll. And if you're in a situation where you're going to hire people to do things for you, you're going to have to meet the payroll. That means you're going to have to produce the work, a lot of work, and make it work, make it be to be able to pay what expenses that you have. It's kind of a double-edged sword as far as that's concerned. I see if I can go through some of my notes here. I suggest, first of all, you concentrate on your name. That is the most important thing. And whenever you put together a brochure, you always put your name right at the top, always right there. Maintain, and because of computers, and used to I did my mailing list on little index cards and Rolodexes, which was a mess. But now with computers and databases and so forth, you can maintain your clients. Enter your clients in there. Then you interest categories. What are they interested in? Then you also, if they buy things, always list what they bought. Keep a good list of what they buy. That way you can go back and say, well, these people have bought before, so therefore we can invest some money in getting information back to them and categorizing the buyer and so forth. Plan yourself some shows. This November we're going to have a show in the upstairs gallery here. I've got maybe 8 to 10 originals, plus the original, like for the ones back behind there. These originals are from estates, and we're going to sell them. We will get to sell it. We'll get a third to sell it, and that sort of thing for the people. And so I'm hoping in November we'll have a show that are just originals in the gallery. Not just,
Can you give us an idea of what the painting behind us, what that would sell for?
well, the last 3 paintings of that size that were with that much work and so forth involved in it sold for $45,000. So basically that's the asking price for this piece is $45,000. And we do have 3 pieces that we have sold for that, so that does establish the value there. My paintings, originals, run from a small watercolor is maybe $600-700 to large pieces like this. Murals, they're more money because they're much larger, but I'm past my mural painting days. I'm not going to do that anymore. But try to find a gallery. If you can find a gallery that works for you. I know that a couple of artists here in town have got galleries out in the Southwest and California that they work with and that sort of thing. I don't. I sell right through my own gallery, and so if I found that to be the best thing. Now, in the 80s, in the mid-80s, I started pre-selling my work. I found a group. It was an investment group. And it was 30 parties, 30 different people. They had an investment group. It was a social group for them. They invested in strange things like racehorses and things like that. And we got to know them, and I proposed to them to do 3 paintings, and then we would share in the profits from the reproductions and so forth and so on. And the initial outlay was, I think, $66,000 or something like that. And so they bought into it, and then I had to pay them back, and I paid them back, and they made $100,000 profit out of it. And so they really thought that was a good deal, and we did a couple of other things and so on. But I pre-sold the work to the people and made contracts. A lot of artists don't like to do that because it ties them down too much. But you got to do what you got to do to make it all work. Contract's contract, and you do a good job on it. Maintain brochures. And when people come in your gallery, they want something to take with them, and something that tells your story. Now, a great thing is a website. I mean, I wish I'd have had a website 47 years ago. But now, in many instances, you can just hand someone your business card and say, my website is here, go to the website. Because you can take all your work and put it on the website. You put all your history on there. All your information can go right there. That's an absolute magnificent marketing type tool, is a website. Work with your media, and like we're doing right now, go out and try to talk with people. I don't know how many television shows and different things that I've done over the years, different types of programs and so forth. You can never get your name out too much. You can never go too far with actually getting what you do out before the public and so forth.
Super. So get people to see your art, main thing, and your name. So, well, I want to thank you once again, Mr. Lucy, for spending time with me here at Spotlight on the Arts. Any final closing statements?
Well, I tell artists the key thing to making it work is to have self-discipline. If you're going to do this, you have got to make yourself sit on that stool and do the work, even though the birds are singing. And I mean, I don't play golf like I used to. Actually, I thought I'd even like to try to play golf for a living at one time. And so I practiced a lot, and I got out and did a lot with the golf. But I made myself, I said, I could go today. It's a beautiful day. No, you better finish this and that sort of thing. And I tell kiddos to do that. And I don't, and think about education we talked about. I hate to see a kiddo go to these big art schools and spend a ton of money on that sort of thing. You can go to the library and check out about a half a dozen books and teach yourself an awful lot about painting and that sort of thing, right? I mean, I have, as far as that's concerned. So diligence and self-discipline.
Thank you so much once again, Mr. Lucy. I sure appreciate it. I'm honored to be with you once again. I'm Rick Jey, your host at JCTV, Spotlight on the Arts, coming to you from Washington, Missouri, at the Gary Lucy Gallery. Thanks for viewing.